Hello everyone, this is Arvind, Digital Marketing Executive at Cenovate. Hope you're all doing great. Today we are going to have an interactive webinar with Debbie Reynolds, who is the founder, CEO, and Chief Data Privacy Officer at Debbie Reynolds Consulting. Today we are going to discuss data use related to biometrics. Let me give you a small introduction about the topic. Biometrics are part of cutting edge technology. Put simply, biometrics are any metrics related to human features. The most common examples of biometric recognition systems are mobile phones and fingerprint and facial recognition technology. So, let me give you a small introduction about our great speaker today. Debbie Reynolds has over 90 media interviews and publications, and over 80 speaking engagements, and over 17 advisory boards, and holds over 15 honors and awards. So, with this wonderful introduction, I'll let you handle the session, Debbie. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. That was a great introduction. I really appreciate it. Uh, I think this is the second time I've done something. I think I did a podcast with you guys earlier this year. So I'm happy to talk about this topic with you. So, biometrics. Let's see. That's me. About biometrics. So, as you said in the introduction, biometrics is about physical features or physical human behaviors and characteristics that can digitally identify a person. Typically, this is used for a lot of different systems, but a lot of times we think about it in terms of access to certain systems, like you said, like maybe someone's phone or a digital device. But we'll be talking about a lot of different types of biometrics and how this plays out in the technology space and also the legal space. All right. So here are some statistics about some biometrics. So biometrics are a hot item, especially right now, facial recognition. So there's a statistic that facial recognition the market uh, by 2024 will generate over $7 billion in revenue, probably be more than that. 97% of airports are rolling out facial recognition technology by 2023. And then a disturbing statistic, especially for me as a woman of color, that 35% of facial recognition happens when identifying dark skinned women compared to 1% of white men. The facial recognition and biometrics technologies are evolving, but also we have to really keep in mind about the people who are creating these systems and be able to find ways to reduce bias and improve the way that these systems operate and identify people. All right. So there are many different types of biometrics, and actually there are biometrics that we don't even know about that are being created. So the typical ones people think about is like, so let's say your phone, you're using your fingerprint to open your phone or you're using your face to open your phone. Uh, Especially the facial recognition one is very prevalent because you don't have to touch a person to be able to get a picture of their face. So just you walking down the street and having a camera capture your image, there are a lot of things that people can do with that. Fingerprint, obviously, you have to have some physical contact with something to be able to capture a fingerprint. And fingerprints have been used for hundreds of years, actually, in terms of being an identifier. But in the digital age, it's so different because those fingerprints, once they're digitized, they can be used for a lot of different purposes. Voice recognition. This is one that, let's say, for instance, you have a smart speaker and you're talking to Siri. Siri on like on Apple iPhone, it has a capability where you can train it to understand your voice. So voice recognition is a big one. It's been around for a while, but it's still evolving. Iris recognition, again, this is one where you have to be very close or have close contact to the machine or the system that's trying to capture your iris. This one I think is going to become a lot more prevalent, especially I've seen it in areas where, let's say, someone needs access to a sensitive area of a factory or something. I've seen companies use, you know, fingerprints, handprints, and definitely iris recognition for stuff like that. Iris recognition, retina scans, similar. Um, Depending on these are getting um, they are getting more sophisticated. So as cameras get better in terms of their ability to capture high quality images, there are going to be situations where people can take retina scans from farther away. So the person doesn't necessarily have to be so close to the machine. So that's going to be something that'll be interesting to see. Uh, Keystroke dynamics. So the way that people type on their computers, and everyone types differently. Even if you were taught a proper way to type, where you have your hands in a certain way, people hit keystrokes in different ways that can make them identifiable from other people. So it's just sort of your own personal habit. This is more of a developing thing in terms of how people are looking at uh, uh, biometrics and how you as an individual are interacting with technology. Signature recognition, this has been around for a while. It's still developing because sometimes, depending on, let's say, you're in a hurry, you sign your name a little bit different than before. Most things right now where you sign your signature, uh, they're not necessarily trying to match it to something. They just have it on file. So as this gets more accurate, and if let's say for instance, it may be a situation where they want to match your signature if you're trying to get a loan or do something that's like very high risk. But typically, signature, like if you go to the store, you sign your name on a credit card receipt or something. They don't really care about that. Gait recognition. Now, this is a newer one that I heard of recently, and I believe this is true. So they say everyone, the way that they walk is very distinct, and you can recognize individuals by the way that they walk. So there is, this gait recognition type of biometric is being created now. And then the last one I have on here, and this is one that I've heard about as well, is people say that if you send a sound wave through the hand of someone, that it is different for each person. So this one is very new. So I would love to see how this one turns out and how successful they are in making this as more of a widespread type of biometric. All right, so biometrics around the world. So biometrics have been used for years as technology has improved. Uh, the biometric, the ways people use biometrics have increased. So some big ways that biometrics are being used around the world. China has like a public surveillance and identity system and a social credit system. That's one way that they're using biometrics. They're obviously using it for health situations where, and this is around the world because of COVID, where they may have cameras taking people's temperatures or scanning them for identity in terms of, let's say, for instance, someone is COVID positive. They want to make sure that those people don't get, public transportation. So it's being used for a lot of different systems like that. I've seen certain locations are using biometric information to uh, not only identify a person, but also make sure that they stay out of certain areas, especially if they're COVID positive. In India, Africa, Brazil, identity and banking systems. These are, very prevalent now. Russia definitely with banking. The EU using it for things like public safety, identity systems, and travel. I think everyone's trying to find ways to use it for travel now. In the U.S., we use biometrics for health, banking, definitely surveillance, law enforcement, and travel. All right. Key privacy laws. I said key privacy laws, but really it's kind of key privacy considerations related to biometrics. So in India, well, you're in India, so I had to add this here about the legal use by the government of Aadhaar, which is an identification system used for many different things. Um, the the EU has the General Data Protection Regulation, or the GDPR. Although they don't spell out biometrics, they do have a part in the GDPR, Article 9, regarding special category data. A lot of times people blend in biometrics with health data because it's about the individual, like specific things about their bodies. So this is one way that they're talking about biometrics. In the US, actually, there's a law called the Biometric Information Privacy Act. We call it BIPA. And the BIPA law is currently the most stringent biometric law in the US for sure, probably the world. So this law, just give you an example, Facebook settled a BIPA case this year for $650 million in the U.S. in the state of Illinois. And if that case had gone to trial, because it became like a class action where many people in Illinois could, be part of this case, but they thought if they had lost that case, they would have had to pay the state of Illinois $35 billion. And this has to do with how many times biometric information is captured. So for the Facebook case, this is about the face identification feature on Facebook. So like, let's say you're on Facebook and it captures your picture. Let's say you took a picture with you and your family. So it captures your picture, it captures your family's picture, and it tries to identify you in a relationship of those people. So for this BIPA law or these BIPA lawsuits, they're saying if you capture someone's biometric information, like their face or whatever, you have to tell them beforehand, before you capture it, and then you have to let them know the specific purpose that you're doing it for and how long you plan to retain the data. So that particular case was about all that. And as you know, because so many millions of people use Facebook, and so many millions of times people's images are flagged or tagged on there. The reason why this case is such a big deal in terms of the cost is because for the biometric, the BIPA Act, they consider every incident being every capture of biometrics. So let's say, for instance, a company uses fingerprint scan and have people log in and log out at work as opposed to some other system. So every time that they interact with technology to capture a biometric, that's like an incident. So like say an incident may cost, a couple of hundred or a few $1,000s per incident. So if a company is infringing on someone's rights in Illinois related to biometrics, they could sue for every time that their biometric was captured. Uh, Illinois, they also have a new law that came out recently about artificial intelligence and video interviewing. So a lot of companies now, especially because of COVID, are doing interviews with people on the internet or like on Zoom and things like that. And so there are companies that create software that try to read the responses or read the person's face and try to make like assumptions about the individual that's being interviewed. So Illinois created a law that says you have to let the person know that you're using this artificial intelligence, what you're doing with the data, how long you're going to keep it, and then really giving the person to be interviewed more visibility into how this data is being used. And then we have the California Consumer Privacy Act. So the California Consumer Privacy Act currently, because the US doesn't have like a federal data privacy law, is currently the most comprehensive privacy law in the US. So it covers a lot of things for consumers in the state of California. Because the because the US doesn't have a federal data privacy law, a lot of states are trying to align with things like CCPA because they think eventually it may, get uh, uh, enacted in their state, whether their state passes it or if there's like a federal law. So there's a lot of activity, I think, going on with biometrics. I think it's only going to increase in terms of the number of laws that are going to be passed about it because as we see, biometrics is being used a lot more, especially because of COVID and like a lot of technologies that are that can be used that don't require contact with individuals, like contactless things, are also things that people are interested in terms of technology. All right. So there's biometrics is, as I said, it's a growing area of technology, but it's also something that has challenges. So a couple of challenges with biometrics is data retention and data purpose. So if a company is capturing data or biometrics about someone, they need to be clear on why they're capturing it, and then how long they're going to keep it. Um, Consent of the individual. Now, consent of the individual is, well, I'll give you an example. So in the EU, because of the GDPR, consent is something that a person has to agree to in advance before, certain types of data are collected. In the US, we're more of a notice country where you don't necessarily have to get the person's consent. You just have to let them know what you're going to do with the data. So I think this is going to be interesting to see how different countries uh, approach biometrics in terms of the sensitivity of it, and then how they plan to let people know what they're doing with biometrics and how they need to interact. So whether it's just notifying the person or giving the person getting their consent will be different, I guess, in different places. Mistaken identity and false positives. This is a big issue, especially if this biometric technology isn't as accurate as it should be on people of different skin colors. So then um, having a technology mistake you for someone else or give a false positive in some way can be very harmful and very damaging to the individuals. We're seeing situations in the US where certain law enforcement agencies are being stopped from using things like facial recognition because they're in a situation where they could make a false judgment about someone, and then obviously in order to have a court case with someone, you have to be able to validate the chain of custody of the information that you gather, and then make sure that it is actually the person that you think it is. So an example of this is recently there was a guy that was arrested because his picture that he got from the driver's license bureau looked, or they thought it looked like, computer said that it looked like someone who had uh, committed a robbery. So the police went and picked him up. They actually arrested him. They took him to court, and the judge looked at the person and looked at uh, the results from the facial recognition technology, and he said this is clearly not the same person. So they let him go. So he was not charged with that crime. But this is a situation that could probably be happening, thousands or millions of times around the world where someone is mistaken, has a mistaken identity, and it could possibly like damage their lives in some way. The potential mix of medical information with business records. So this is a big deal because of COVID. So typically when people were um, working with medical information, it was typically a situation where they were just working with their medical provider. So let's say you go to a doctor and you have whether you have illness or you have a checkup, you're exchanging information with a medical provider about your health. So now because of COVID, and a lot of businesses, in order to stay in business, they are very concerned about the health of their employees. So a lot of them are doing things like contact tracing within their company. They're using like um, thermal or temperature scans to see if someone is sick or not. And then a lot of those records about the health of the individual start start to seep into business records, which aren't really created to protect medical information. So there's a danger there with the mixing up medical information with business records. And then, of course, there's a cybersecurity and breach risk. So let's say a company, they have every right to collect biometrics, or they're using certain tools that are collecting biometric information. Then you have to worry about how secure is your biometric information. So can it be breached? Are the companies that are capturing this data, are they taking the extra steps that they need to protect it? Because unlike your password, like someone breaches your account, you can change your password, but if someone breaches like biometric markers about you, you can't change your face, you can't change your thumbprint, you can't change your retina. So this is a super high priority for companies to be able to protect this information, and that there be regulations to make sure that companies understand the seriousness of biometric data and how it's different than other types of data. And then deep fakes. So this is something I'm hoping a lot of people start talking about it a bit more. So deep fakes is the ability of someone to use the technology to uh, maybe put their face on someone else's body, or change or create images or videos that look like it's the person, but it really isn't. So um, big companies like Google and Facebook are working on technologies to try to identify deep fakes, because these can be very damaging. So let's say you're going for a job interview or something, and someone created a deep fake of you doing something illegal or embarrassing that would you know harm your reputation or your prospects or something. It's hard for people, just the regular human eye, sometimes to be able to tell the difference between a deep fake and a real video. So this is, very much a problem that, you know, right now there really aren't really good laws about deep fakes, and the technology is getting so much better. I think we just have to be vigilant about it and just watch where that goes. The future of biometrics. Um, so biometrics, I know that there have been, as I said, moratoriums for certain law enforcement agencies using biometrics uh, in like high state situations where, let's say, someone is going to go in jail, or someone you think they committed a crime, without that stuff being authenticated, really, I think it's going to have problems being used, in courts of law. But there's biometrics is definitely not going away. So we are seeing now, and we will continue to see biometrics used in things like visitor access, physical security. Um, there are new biometrics now with like employee productivity. So let's say you're on a Zoom call. Zoom has a feature called attention tracking, where it's sort of tracking your eyeballs to see if you're paying attention to the Zoom. So that's something that employers can use. And there are also quite a few technologies that are being created to track employees' productivity, as like facial recognition through the computer, or different, or tracking people's keystrokes to make sure that they're working, especially they're working from home or they're not in the office. Uh, Biometrics is threat detection. This is something that's going to be used a lot. So let's say for instance, there's like a sensitive area, like a water treatment plant or something. Um, these types of installations, they're looking to use biometrics to say, let's say for instance, someone is close or nearby. They want to be able to scan that person and be able to tell whether they're, uh, you know, going to be a threat. Who is it? Things like that. So being able to walk in the sensitive areas or high density areas, I think threat detection will be something that will be used quite a lot. Identity systems. So this is going to be big all over the world, because not every country has you know, has identification systems for everybody. So uh, this is going to be big because in countries or in other places where people aren't using like typical identity things like ID cards, things like that. And then also, I think there's going to be a situation where, right now, our identities in terms of like identification and being able to, let's say, bank or buy a car or do different things like that, you have to have certain types of credentials to be able to make sure that you are who you say that you are. So I think what's going to happen is that the way technology is going, instead of it being like, let's say, ID or something in your area or in your town or your country, they're probably going to be biometrics that can be used everywhere. So think of like a passport that you can use anywhere, like anywhere that you go in the world. And it wouldn't be something issued by your state or your government. It would be some other marker that can tell that you are who you say that you are wherever you go. And then health passports. So because of COVID, a lot of countries are trying to figure out how they can get tourism back, how they can get business travel back. And this is really difficult in the time of COVID because you don't know who is sick or who's not. You don't want people traveling who are ill that can spread illness to other people. A lot of this is based on the liability, where let's say you get on the plane with someone, they have COVID, they give you COVID, there may be a lawsuit because of that because you let this person on the plane. So a lot of different countries are trying to work out how they can get travelers back traveling. And one idea about this is like a health passport. So whether that be not necessarily a physical passport, but maybe a digital one where, let's say, you scan your phone and they say, from your doctor or something, like you had a test recently, you were negative, you can go, you can travel, within a certain amount of time. This is already being used in places like China, but I think that it's going to become a lot more prevalent in other locations as people start traveling more, and as governments or travel agencies or even airlines are thinking differently about this. So I think two airlines I can think of, Lufthansa and uh, Emirates, they're already testing people for COVID before they get on planes. If you want to fly on Lufthansa or Emirates, I think when you get in the airport, they actually give you a COVID test. And if you don't pass the COVID test, then you can't get on the airplane. So this is going to be interesting to see how this plays out. So anyone can contact me. I'm available on LinkedIn. They can contact me at DebbieReynoldsConsulting.com. I'm happy to chat with people and happy to connect. So that's it.
So great, Debbie. Thank you so much for taking your valuable time and enlightening all of us. I just have a couple of questions for you. So, if you permit, I would ask you.
Yes.
Sure. Thank you so much. How will the biometrics be deployed across endpoints and enterprises?
Well, that is the question. That's the question that a lot of companies are trying to answer with their products. So I think I don't know. I feel like it's almost like encryption, where you can do encryption at a lot of different points. So I think it's up to the company to decide how they want to do that. Maybe they want to do, let's say a company wants to say, I want to be able to authenticate that the person is who they say they are before they even walk in the building. So then if they do that, then they're assuming that the person has the right credentials to log in, that they are who they say that they are, or certain areas that someone needs to access. Maybe they want to use biometrics for that. Like, let's say a server room or some place where some highly sensitive data is. They may want to have an additional kind of biometric check at that point. So It really just depends on the company. There are lots of technologies out there right now that are trying to answer that question based on how people uh, want to deploy those types of technologies.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And the last question is, are these biometrics safe during authentication?
That's an excellent question. So that's probably the golden question, I would say. So people want to know that if they're given these biometrics, can they be authenticated? Is it real? Can they be manipulated? So there are companies right now that are working on that issue right now. So the idea is to make sure that if you capture biometrics, that is done in such a way that you can validate that this is who the person says that they are, and it's something that can't be manipulated through the process in terms of chain of custody. So making sure you validate the person is who they say that they are, you capture their biometrics, you can make sure that those biometrics travel with that person and with all their information, and that if someone were to try to crack that identity or try to manipulate it, they wouldn't be able to do that. So that's, again, that's like the golden question. Like, can as biometric use becomes more prevalent, how can we lock it down? How can we make sure that it is not compromised? And then creating ways that, maybe it's a chain thing where so many different uh, boxes have to be checked in some way, shape, or form in order for you to get a green light. So then, so like if you pass these, 10 or 12 tests in terms of the technology of how it authenticates someone, then you can say, okay, for sure, this is the person that they say that they are. And it's not like a fake person, it's not a bot, it's not a synthetic identity.
Great, Debbie. Great. Thank you so much. We all had a wonderful time. Hope you had a wonderful time as well. And we can't wait to see you on another wonderful session. Thank you so much to everyone who is going to be watching this. Please share it with your team and please share it with your network also. And like I said, we'll all meet on another wonderful session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.